Every vote from every citizen deserves to be counted.
What the hell is going on, Catherine?
Who won Florida?
The eyes of the world have landed on me.
How hard is it to punch a paper ballot?
It's pretty bad when you're 80-something years old, you're arthritic, and you're blind as a bat.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today, as always, I have Simmons from Kickseat.com on, and we're talking about a movie that I sincerely hope we don't relive, but in some ways, I kind of hope we do relive it so then we don't have the Supreme Court immediately just throw out all the absentee ballots like they did in Wisconsin. We're talking about Recounts, the 2008 film looking back at the 2000 Florida election debacle. A movie that in some ways hasn't aged well because the main character is played by Kevin Spacey, which, okay, whatever. He was a good guy at it. But it was nice to see a film where people on both political sides seemed like decent human beings to a certain extent, outside of Tom Willingson's character contacting Roger Ailes to bring in Roger Stone. I'm getting my Rogers confused. Roger Stone in to intimidate, I believe it was protesters post-election. Which sounds familiar. Having said that, elections, Recount, not election. That's a different film. Recounts okay. It's kind of like a movie that a lot of other films have mimicked in its style. Like most recently, the Comey Effect. Like they'll cut to somebody and then there'll be a lower third saying their name and occupation in it.
Yeah.
For instance, you cut to Kevin Spacey. It says Ron Crane, in charge of Al Gore's election campaign, whatever.
And you you kind of need that, especially in a movie that's this dense. I mean, this was an HBO picture, so it's not something like that the mass audience is going to go out and pay to see, but it's also something that they can watch at home. So I think, and it's good for me personally now watching something that captures events from 20 years ago, because I was really deep into this stuff back in the day, but I had forgotten a lot of the key players, because it does really boil down to a lot of local politics, or at least politics that are local to the region when this is going on. So I found that kind of helpful. And even then I was dusting off the cobwebs because, Jay Roach really throws a lot of people and those lower third titles at you in the first 10 minutes, especially. And I'm glad I was taking notes.
Yes. I can't even remember. I think I have IMDb open and I can read everyone's names on here. Unfortunately, it doesn't have their occupation as well. So I'm going to sound stupid throughout this podcast. But having said that, great job. It doesn't hold up as well as it used to. I think Game Changer kind of holds up better which was kind of Jay Roach's follow-up film. I guess you could call Catherine Harris, Laura Dern's character, sort of the prequel to Sarah Palin in that respect, where, you kind of had this bonehead lady who is in charge of this very important event who couldn't wrap her head around reality. I think Catherine Harris had more of her shit together than Sarah Palin did. And Sarah Palin almost pales in comparison to what we have now. Or does she? She's about as dumb as Trump, if not dumber. No, she's dumber than Trump. I'll say that. But with that said, what were your thoughts on the film? How do you think it's aged?
Well, I think that's the weird thing is I had a sense of deja vu while I was watching. I just finished this an hour ago. I remember watching it, I think, when it came out and thinking, wow, this is cool. Because, again, I was very much a politico on the progressive side back in 2008, for sure. And watching it now, it's weird because you're right. There are movies that have kind of taken this template, or I don't know if this was the template that started the wave of films that we were kind of discussing, but it reminds me a lot of The Big Short, which I think is the evolved version of this movie, because Jay Roach, who this is not a knock against him, but he came from a comedy background. He did the Austin Powers movies and the Meet the movies like Meet the Parents and Meet the Fockers. So he had this sense of really kind of crowd pleasing comedy. But then it was around this time that he started tackling overtly political films almost exclusively. So it's got this weird balance of, hey, we want to tell serious political stories, but I'm still going to, use the comedic training to make it a bit more palatable to audiences, which I don't object to in principle. It's just the execution here I thought was a bit lacking. I think The Big Short did it much better. There are some scenes in this film that are so serious and I think touching that I wish that a different filmmaker had tackled this subject and just made a serious film about a very serious issue. Like you mentioned Laura Dern. I love her as an actress, but watching, I watched the first couple scenes of her as Catherine Harris, and I'm like, I remember Catherine Harris as being a public figure from 2000. And I remember how she was portrayed in, maybe it was Fahrenheit 9/11, the Michael Moore documentary. It was probably that one. And I'm like, but there's something really cartoonish about the way that Dern is playing her. So I paused the movie and I went to YouTube and I watched a few interviews with her, like vintage interviews, and even one that was more recent. I'm like, yeah, this is, it's kind of like the rest of the film. It is an overtly partisan skewering of history, rightfully or wrongfully so. But with that, you get certain portrayals that, if you are not immersed in politics and you're like, oh, I heard there was something about this 2000 election, and pay attention to, oh, they made a movie, that's great, I don't have to read about it, then you could walk away with an impression that is almost unfair to certain figures, whether or not you like what they did or not. I don't think you can call Catherine Harris an idiot, and she certainly wasn't as bubbly as Laura Dern portrayed her.
Right. Well, exactly. Again, I don't even remember anything about Catherine Harris. I didn't remember she existed, quite frankly, before this. So, because 20 years ago, all I remember was that this election went on and for those who are unaware of what Recount is, I probably should explain what the movie was about, but I'm a terrible host. It's fine. What Recount's about is the 2000 election between Bush versus Gore after Election Day. With guess what, Florida. You know how Florida always gets all that flack whenever there's an election, people go, oh, it comes down to Florida, it comes down to Florida. Well, this was sort of the pinnacle of Florida showing how completely incompetent of a state it is, from the left and from the right. And it basically, what happened is it took about a month for everyone to count the votes for this election. And as this film portrays it, they stopped counting the votes when they were essentially, I think, like 100 votes away from Al Gore taking it and two counties left. Yeah,
it was 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, this is sort of the behind the scenes of what happened there. And I think in some ways it was objective, but some ways it certainly did, portray the left as the good guys and the underdogs kind of walking into a losing battle, and I think no matter what happened, they weren't going to win. Whether or not who won the election, we'll never know. That's sort of the whole thing with like the ending shot of the film, sort of reminiscing the ending shot of Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you said they're walking to a losing battle. I disagree. And I think that's something that the film does bring across very well, is that, for as much as the Democrats felt that they were in the right, and I think Ron Klain, as portrayed by Kevin Spacey, who, he's had his problems in recent years, but he is still a hell of an actor. There's a reason that he has won Oscars, and he was like kind of America's actor guy until things came out about him that were awful. But one of the things that comes across is that he was the guy who was standing up, kind of like the Captain America thing, like when the whole world is against you, you plant your feet and stand strong or whatever. He was the guy that after the election was over, Gore conceded to Bush, everyone was like, well, it's over. And even when he gets a phone call from his operative, played by Dennis Leary, saying that there's problems with the numbers, he was like trying to get in touch with everybody, and they're like, forget about it, whatever. He finally got the right person to get in front of Al Gore and say, there's a problem with the numbers. So Al Gore retracted his concession, and then this fight happened. But throughout the course of the film, what you see is Democrats being timid and afraid to look bad and not taking the fight to the streets, whereas you've got James Baker. This movie needed, or the Democrats needed, a James Baker on their side. What was it? Oh my God, I can't remember his name. Warren Christopher, played by John Hurt, was the James Baker of that team, but he was just kind of this older, dithering kind of a guy. Not to say he wasn't sharp in his day, but he just was ill-equipped to handle this. And you've got Ron Klain. He's almost like the Richard Clark of the 9/11 situation a few years later, where he was screaming like, they are coming to attack us. And everyone's like, whatever. But so when you say it was a losing battle, I think it was a losing battle because they had crappy lieutenants. And I think if they'd had real leadership, this could have been ugly and it could have been more drawn out, but we could have witnessed a very different version of history.
Yeah, well, I was trying to be bipartisan, which is why I was claiming the way.
I mean, why?
Because you're always like, I disagree. You're wrong, Mike.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I understand where you're coming from, but that's something that really struck me this time, and I didn't pick up on it in 2008, possibly because I was, gulping down the Kool-Aid by the gallons. I'm like, no, this didn't have to be an inevitable thing. I understand people were upset about it, like it wasn't fair and the Supreme Court decided. I'm like, yeah, because you fuckers let them,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Well, Florida was run 90% by Republicans.
Yeah, but it had a majority Democrat Supreme Court.
Well, that does help. Does. They don't have that shit anymore. We are fucked. We're fucked. We're fucked. We're fucked. Oh, sorry. For Tuesday, that's kind of how I feel. For Tuesday, I'm doing all this election stuff. I'm calling undecided voters, but I feel like I'm on the Titanic playing my violin before it's about to sink. Well,
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's that based on? Like, how are you going to feel on Tuesday or whenever this thing is decided? Because I feel like, I think I share your pessimism that this 2020 might be a flashback to 2000, where we might not know the results for a while. What if Biden wins? Then will your fears be unfounded? And if so, what do you think is causing you to be afraid right now?
Well, first off, I have a horrible, crippling anxiety disorder, and
election day. That's everybody in 2020.
Yes. An election day just helps compound that, and then on top of that, the amount of just cheating that's going on is absolutely petrifying. I mean, we have today with Wisconsin. They are not today. A few days ago with Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Supreme Court said that they will not count absentee ballots that come in after Election Day, which essentially is throwing away 200,000 votes.
Okay.
So we have that. And then on top of that, now we have a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. With that, we have various states that are pretty much going to be in jeopardy. We have the election interference from Russia, which dwarfs what's happening in 2016. Voting machines were created because of the 2000 election, and to hack a voting machine is extremely simple. There was a study from Stanford that came out back in 2004 during the John Kerry versus George Bush election that detailed how you could steal a vote on a voting machine. And it's quite simple. You take out the memory card, you put it in your computer, you install malicious software, you pop back in the memory card, it can flip the votes and there's no way of tracking it. And you could hack this fucker within like 30 seconds. So,
right. Yeah. And I understand that. The first two examples you gave, though, I don't know how that qualifies as cheating. You've got a conservative majority Supreme Court, and you've got the Wisconsin, Supreme Court passing that ruling. I'm not qualified enough to speak on the ruling about the absentee ballots, but it doesn't seem that dissimilar from what we saw in Recount with the talk about the ballots. But here's the thing: they went to court and they made a case, and that ruling was based on the evidence that was put for them. There's nothing to suggest, at least not anything I've seen, that you've got some mustache twirling person buying influence on the court saying, I think that I want to throw this to my team. So there, I mean, these things are decided upon, they're ruled upon. And as far as the Supreme Court goes, I mean, you've got a conservative majority, people who happen to be conservatives who are on the court, and people who are Democrats who happen to be on the court. That's fine. And if the history of the Supreme Court was dominated by completely partisan rulings, I might agree with you, but there is a fine tradition of people going against the grain of what they were appointed, ostensibly, people were appointed by Republicans voting on in favor of quote unquote Democrats and vice versa. So if it makes it to the Supreme Court, yeah, it'll be an interesting fight, but I don't share your pessimism that just because the people sitting on the bench have particular views in their personal lives, that it's going to necessarily affect the vote.
Well, I sincerely hope you're right. My God, I hope you're right. I will say that there is a little glimmer of hope I found yesterday in the news. There was a New York Times article that said that the Supreme Court is allowing deadlines for absentee ballots in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, which is definitely a sigh of relief. And hopefully, with this, I mean, it's no coincidence that Mitch McConnell and the Republican Senate hammered through Amy Coney Barrett. I don't really have an opinion on her. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say, oh, she's unqualified, this and that. I honestly don't know. But I always hate adding but to any sentence. But the fact that she was put through in the Supreme Court so quickly and against Ruth Bader Ginsburg's own fervent wishes is something that raises the alarm for me.
Well, I mean, that's because I've heard that too. But I guess my question is, if you're looking to, I know Antonin Scalia was replaced and all this other stuff, but if Antonin Scalia's deathbed wish had been, I don't want this vacancy filled until the next president. I mean, there's nothing constitutional about it. It's also deathbed hearsay, from what I understand. So that argument doesn't really carry weight with me. Well, we're sure. Yeah. But, again, if Scalia's son had come out, well, I was there with my dad when he died, and he said he doesn't want anyone to appoint the next judge until, the election's over. Again, it's what are you going to believe? And I'm not saying that. There's 2 points here. One, I don't necessarily not believe Ruth Bader Ginsburg's daughter, but on the other hand, and I think more importantly, it doesn't hold any kind of weight. Yeah, sure, it was her dying wish, but we do have a country to move forward with, so it's within the rights. Nobody broke any laws in this confirmation, so she's in. It's fine. It's done.
Well, but with everything that's going on, we have a global pandemic. Mm-hmm. We have an economy going in the toilet. Don't you think the Senate would focus more on helping the people with an economic relief rather than focusing on the Supreme Court justice right now?
Well, and I think, was it Jake Tapper said to Nancy Pelosi about, blocking the stimulus relief? He said, mm-hmm. you could take yes for an answer, Nancy. So None of this is, there's a billion different issues going on, and we are still getting some things done. So the thing is, it was in his right to do so. Trump, I think, made a political calculation along with the Republicans that if this went on past the election, that they might not be able to appoint a person that they wanted to appoint, it's a reasonable calculation. It might be a cynical one, but it's also completely within the rules. It's sort of like, well, you shouldn't do this. I'm like, well, then you go back and rewrite the Constitution or amend it to say that if someone dies 4 months before an election, then you cannot appoint a Supreme Court justice. No one's done that. And as far as the voting machines goes, I agree. That was a point of outrage in 2004. And kind of to Kevin Spacey, to bring it back to the movie we were talking about, Ron Klain's point, he was going to sue Florida to, essentially update the standards for ballot handling moving forward. I don't know that any of that ever happened. And there's been 14 years, including 8 years of a Democratic president who, apparently their hair was all on fire about this stuff. What changed? Nothing. It's still the same old system.
Yeah, I don't know why Obama didn't do shit. I mean, he did get a Republican Senate within his second term, but still,
but
why didn't he do anything? You know?
And that's a big criticism of Obama, which I share, which is the first 2 years of his presidency, from 09 to essentially 11, they had everything. And they didn't prosecute the big banks that crashed the economy. They didn't go after this voter thing or the election machines interference, all that stuff. So yeah, and that's one of the that's one of the things that disillusioned me about the guy pretty early on. But
I like him, but I will say there was a great point that AOC brought up when there was this little, because I'm doing this phone banking thing with People's Action, and we're doing this thing called deep canvassing, which you talk to people who are undecided voters, and she said,
sorry, but bravo, but I think I still want to commend you again for doing that, because I think that's really cool.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. I can't wait to stop doing it.
Only got a few more days.
Oh God, oh God. I want to talk to people about brain cells again. All right. They don't listen to this podcast, so it's fine. But AOC was saying, in this little party thing that the group was having that was online, that Democrats, they're not the end solution either. The thing is, and Democrats hate her for saying this, activism doesn't end after an election. Activism continues, even let's say, knock on wood, the Democrats take the House, they take the Senate, they take the presidency, best case scenario. You still have to push them. You still have to bother them to put in legislation that will help the people. And I think during the Obama years, Democrats were like, well, Obama's in, everything's fine now. Let's go about our lives.
Yeah.
And because we did that and we didn't push anyone to do anything, they failed to take on the big banks. They failed to take on the electoral process. They failed to do anything about the Patriot Act. And, I could be hateful and disillusioned about Obama, but overall, I think he did a great job. He dug us out of an economic crisis. We had 8 years of peace.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. He did expand the number of wars that we were in overseas, and also the entire, Black Lives Matter movement and all that racial unrest did start towards the end of his first term. This is not a Trump phenomenon.
Well, yes, they did. They did happen while Obama was in office, but I don't think he's responsible for. I don't think there's.
Well, but I mean, so you're saying he presided over an era of peace, and I got to push back on that.
Okay, but overall, it hasn't been the way it has been now. Trump is throwing fuel onto a fire that's already been there, and Obama at least tried to bring in some civility, through political correctness, which is what we need. Being politically correct is being an adult, because if we're going around saying, fuck you, no, fuck you, like Trump is, then that doesn't do anyone any good, and now we're here. Are the riots that we've been having dwarf the original Black Lives Matter riots, and they are within their rights to have these protests. And of course, they wouldn't really get out of hand until guys like the Proud Boys would come in and make them worse.
I wasn't
finished. But I wasn't finished. All right. Having said that, they have had protests back during the Obama years that were violent, where they did clash with the police. But
who, the Proud Boys?
No, the Black Lives Matter.
Oh, okay.
No. And in some ways, I don't know if I can blame them when your entire life you're being treated like a secondhand citizen and you're constantly in fear of yourself. That's why it's Black Lives Matter, not All Lives Matter, because guess what? White people's lives, they're not being examined through a microscope and treated like crap. It's mostly black people. And that's why they kind of snap it. I'm not condoning it, but I understand it.
I neither condone nor understand it, frankly, but that's a whole another conversation. And I'm speaking as someone who is half black, so just to correct the record in case I was like, "Who's this white boy?"
No, I know. Yeah.
Anyway, So recount.
Recount. But no, but I'm afraid that we're heading towards a repetition of history. If anything, with this new conservative Supreme Court, I think Recount will be a much shorter film, where they'll say, "Hey, this county, we haven't counted all the ballots," and the Supreme Court will go, "Don't worry about it. It's past election day. We don't want to repeat 2000. Just throw it out," and then they'll just give it to Trump. And then that'll be it. That'll be the end of the film, essentially. Like Joe Biden needs to win by such a tidal wave that there is no doubt that he has won and that we're not counting votes afterwards. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. And the 2000 election debacle has historically led to more election debacles to come down the road. And when it comes to the movie itself, it's perfectly fine, but it's nothing that I would write home about. As you said, the Big Short is a much better movie. Game Changer is a much better movie. The Comey Effect, not so much.
You keep talking about this. I kind of want to see it because you keep mentioning how bad it is, but then I also don't want to waste my time.
If you want to see a movie that's partisan, whoo boy, that one, I am as liberal as it gets. I'm as annoying as it gets. I don't wear a pink pussy hat or anything. Still, I'm pretty to the left. It's no secret. But with that said, I keep saying having said that. With that said, now I'm catching my own shit.
Take a drink. There you go.
I can't. Oh, I took a drink last night. I took a few just to help myself go to sleep. Comey Effect is basically just preaching to the choir, where you're not going to win over any voter. Even voters who are on my side are going, this is just really cheesy. There's a particular scene where they're in the middle of Trump's inauguration. James Comey's wife and daughters, they're protesting against Trump. And before you even see them on camera, there's these two kind of random characters who go, "Oh, this election is terrible. Fuck James Comey, right? Yeah, fuck James Comey." And then they walk out of frame. And then behind them is James Comey's wife and daughter.
Yeah.
And then James Comey's wife turns to her daughter and says to them, "Just ignore them. Today it's about restoring democracy," or some crap like that. I don't know. Whatever they show Donald Trump in the movie, he's shot in intimidating slow motion with Dutch angles and silhouettes. The camera's like right in on Brendan Gleeson's face as he's, doing the Trump sniffing, and he's speaking in this real raspy tone, and he's like an evil little leprechaun gremlin guy, because Brendan Gleeson's so Irish. Yeah.
Well, that scene you just described with the wife and daughter, that reminds me of something that I saw in Recount towards the end when the Supreme Court handed down what is still a baffling decision about how we're ruling this way, but this cannot essentially become precedent. This is a one-time only deal. Yeah. And then someone in the Democrats' office, I don't know if they were talking to Ron Klain or one of the other people, but they said it's just so cheesy. He said, "Have they ever done this before?" And then someone says, "Never once in the history of the Supreme Court." I'm like, I like Danny Strong, who's the screenwriter, who was also he was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer back in the day, and now has gone on to write. He wrote Game Change. He also I don't know if he created it, but he wrote the first few episodes of Empire on Fox. I generally like him, but I find that his films tend to have this. Not exactly nostalgia, but definitely a quality of looking back on the events that he's writing about, instead of just having a completely subjective movie about what happened. It's all of this kind of like hand wringing. Can you believe we actually went through all this stuff? Which kind of throws me off. Like towards the end, I think it might even be that same scene when the Supreme Court ruling came down. Kevin Spacey is like, he's sitting in his chair, and I think he stands up and he's just got his hands out like I mean, can you guys believe this kind of a gesture? I'm like, maybe that happened, but it just felt very much like that was the screenwriter saying, hey guys, remember this? Wasn't this crazy? I'm like, yeah, I'm following what's going on. You don't have to, give me the 2008 hysterics.
Are you talking about the scene where Kevin Spacey's in the bar? And he's
No.
like, I want to know who won this election. Who fucking won it?
Well, that's another instance, but no, I'm talking about a different scene. But no, and there's a few of these kinds of winking moments throughout that really shows. I would ascribe these more to the Jay Roach sensibility than the Danny Strong. But there's a scene where Kevin Spacey is talking to Dennis Leary, and Dennis Leary is like laying out how it's very early on how they can go after the numbers and push a recount, and he's swearing up a storm, and then Kevin Spacey says, did anyone ever tell you that you say fuck a lot? I'm like, cause it's Dennis Leary, want. I'm like, yeah, got it. Yep. Yeah. Jesus.
I mean, that was kind of his character, though. They didn't need to say, does anyone ever tell you say fuck a lot? Yeah, they didn't need that.
Right. And that's the thing is like, I again, if I'm watching this and I know nothing about this guy, I might think, oh, well, he had a really foul mouth. Or it could be that it's just they got Dennis Leary to play this part, so they let him Leary it up a bit. And so you walk away with the impression that whoever he was playing must have been a real, irascible jerk.
Yeah. That, I think the guy was just frustrated at the moment, because it was a frustrating situation. I didn't think the guy needed, like, if someone was frustrated, I wouldn't tell him like, oh, you say fuck a lot.
Right.
I just let him blow off some steam.
Yeah.
If I was in Kevin Spacey's position, great. I don't want to ever say the words Kevin Spacey's position.
Touche.
Yeah. Oh God. But
and
this is pre House of Cards too. I just thought about that.
That's true. Yeah. By a few years. There's one other line. The great Bob Balaban played Ben Ginsberg, who was he's like the Bush campaign coordinator in Florida.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a line taken from history or if this is just Danny Strong being cheeky, because he delivers it straight and no one else in the room reacts to it. But I smirked. He said, because this is before the recount business, and he thought this was just going to be a straight election. He said, by tomorrow morning, the stains of Bill Clinton will be washed away.
Yeah, like Jesus Christ, that came straight from a script. Yes. The stains of Bill Clinton will be washed away. Insanity will be and peacefulness will be restored to the White House. Everyone was like, yay! Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Although the one line where they're saying, did this ever happen before? Not in the history of the Supreme Court. I would think that's fake, but I've had so many moments like that this year where I'm like, has that happened before? And they're like, never. Like, that has happened countless times.
I understand it, and partially it may come down to if the movie weren't already filled with these sort of meta contextual examples of dialogue, I might let it pass. But it's also delivered in such a way that it's like that. Can you believe this happened? Yeah, this is 2008 speaking. We sure can't. We never got over it. Kind of a thing.
Like they should have turned directly towards the camera and been like, this is bad. Don't let this happen again.
It was breaking the fourth wall by not breaking the fourth wall.
It's a bit like that moment in JFK where Kevin Costner gives his 30-minute speech, then he turns directly towards the camera, and then he says, it's up to you. And you go, oh, God.
I thought I would like to think he was talking to Oliver Stone, like, it's up to you whether or not you keep this whole 30-minute thing.
Yeah, it's up to you whether you use this take.
One thing I did. This is how long ago this movie came out, and how long even 2008 was. But they have tons of clips of like actual news reportage and coverage of the event, and I saw Tim Russert on screen doing a Meet the Press thing. I was like, I really miss Tim Russert.
Yeah, I do too. They replaced him with that guy. I keep calling him Sandpaper Face, because his face looks like you fucking smashed it in with an iron, rubbed sandpaper on it.
Yeah.
What's his name? I don't know. Like, he was a Bush guy, and over after him.
No, well, at first it was David Gregory.
That's him. Yeah, Sandpaper Face.
Yeah, but then and then now it's I can't remember the name of the guy with the bad haircut and the goatee. But
Chuck Todd.
Chuck Todd, yes.
Sucks.
I kept thinking I was gonna call him Joe too. But he kind of looks like a
He looks like, yeah. I don't know. Chuck Todd looks like he works in a record store.
Now I kind of want to see that show. But no, but yeah, you're right. There is a certain watching, and I don't know if this is just because of the way that I've viewed politics in the last 10 plus years, but I used to watch Meet the Press with Tim Russert on it, and I felt like if there's an angle being presented here, I can't see it. He just seems like such a down the middle, like trying to get the facts guy who lets his guests speak. There's something that has really been lost there, at least in that program.
Yeah, that's why I read my news from BBC. I go on Washington Post, I go on New York Times, like, okay, here's the facts. Now here's 80 pages of what I think this is bullshit. Not again. Just give me the fucking story. I'll remember not to swear on the Mandalorian podcast. Don't worry.
Coming up this Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. Central. No,
Where's
actually,
fucking Ahsoka? All right, sorry.
Get it out now.
Yeah.
No, that's the that I think. First of all, you should just say you should start your own website or newspaper called "Just Give Me the Fucking Truth" or whatever you just said. And it'd be perfect.
Just give me the fucking story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every story there's like 5,000 stories, and they're all 3 sentences long because it's just the facts distilled through the sieve of spin to get to the real fucking story.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's like, and I was like, the Trump tax article was great. I like that one. Then I subscribed to New York Times, and then I'm like, oh wait, now I want to unsubscribe because the rest of these articles are just doom and gloom and someone's opinion, and I can't take all that doom scrolling every day.
I like that. Did you come up with that? Doom scrolling?
No, I read that from a New York Times article. It was
that an advertisement for the paper? Number one in doom scrolling.
Yeah, that in Washington Post. I remember when North Korea was going on. Every time I'd click on Washington Post, and in big red letters, it'd be like, North Korea said they're gonna send a Christmas gift. Like, ah! That's kind of my mindset every day when going through the news. Just That should be the Washington Post's new slogan. Is just instead of democracy dies here in a black background with white font.
Now, one thing I wanted to talk about real quick. You brought him up earlier, Tom Wilkinson as Jim Baker.
Yeah,
I thought he was great in the part, and I did. That's one of the bit of balance that was kind of surprising towards the end of the film, after the Republicans have, I guess, won, or at least their candidate was selected, not elected, as the old phrase went.
I know what scene you're going to talk about.
It's the one with Balaban and Wilkinson in the office, talking about what Baker's going to do next, I think. And he starts sharing the story about how he was a Democrat until he was 40. Yeah. And the story of how he became a Republican was one of the most touching things. And it really humanized not only him, but the person who turned him onto that journey, which is also ironic because that guy did a lot of monstrous, inhuman things during his tenure. So junior and senior.
Which president hasn't?
Right. I mean, and that's the thing, is it really, I think, honed in on the fact that despite everything that we see and hear and read and think we know about politics, the people who comprise these political situations are people, and they've all had their, their good points and bad points and awesome points and devilish points. But everyone's got some kind of a story that can make them relate to people. It reminded me of that scene in Dave where Kevin Kline is talking to Ben Kingsley, his VP, who's been kind of lampooned in the press as being this like Dan Quayle kind of an idiot. But they have a heart to heart, and he's like, "How did you get into politics?" And Ben Kingsley's story about, just like running for a local office because he found out some local issue he cared about, and then he rose up through the ranks and he really wanted to help people. I'm like, that's a beautiful story, and it's a kind of a parallel to Jim Baker of all things. I did not expect to come out of this movie thinking, wow, Jim Baker, who knew?
Yeah, I don't even remember anything about James Baker. I mean, how young was I? Like 14 in 2004 or something like that. So,
Jesus.
But I don't want to live those years again. Those are, but yeah, James Baker has this whole story about how his wife passed away, and George H.W. Bush asked him to work on his campaign just because he wanted him to get his mind off of things. But he doesn't reveal it's George H.W. Bush. But yeah, Bob Balaban. Did I say it right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I thought I almost said Taliban.
Oh my God, that poor guy. I wonder how many times that mix-up happened in like 2004.
Oh, poor Bob Taliban. But no, they don't reveal that it's George H.W. Bush. He just says, this man came up to me and he told me, well, come work on my campaign. Well, I'm a Democrat, right? That's okay. Just to get your mind off of something. Well, Bob Balaban goes, that sounds like a wonderful guy. Then he points to the picture of George Bush. He sure is. And he was like, oh, yeah, he's not a bad guy. He's just because he kind of comes off like this stickler. He always has his arms crossed and he's looking down like, and he's saying, call Roger Ailes or Roger Stone, whatever the fuck Roger. And then, but in the end, yeah, he was just a human being. I mean, think of Kellyanne Conway. She's married to a Democrat,
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know how anyone could find her attractive, but that's another story. She looks like the Crypt Keeper. I'm going to take cheap shots. I'm emotional.
Well, that's fine. And also married to a Democrat, and also has a daughter who is famously not aligned with politics. So yeah, that's it's a fascinating times we live in for sure. But yeah, I really did like that last closing scene. And one thing about James Baker as well, the end of this film, which normally I think it's kind of cheesy when they do this, but in this particular case, it was so uncanny. They showed all these news clips of the actual people that we've been seeing portrayed in the film. Like you'll see the real Ron Clay and all this. When they showed the real Jim Baker, I was like, oh, they forgot to swap out the footage of Tom Wilkinson. I'm like, fuck no, that's actually Jim Baker. And he looks so much like Tom Wilkinson. It's weird.
Yeah. That's one of the that was definitely better than Tom Wilkinson's portrayal of Carmine Falcone. Talking about doing American accents, where he's like, "Your mommy and daddy got shot, bada bing, gabagool."
I actually liked his performance because I could see how hard he was working. He almost created a new like Italian English mob accent.
Yeah.
Like a dog. Like what?
Yeah. Like a bug. You think about your old bookie. Bang. Yeah. But he was great at, was John Hurt supposed to be partially English, or was that just him struggling because he's like super fucking English?
That's something I actually forgot to look up afterwards because I was like, he's not trying.
He was like super, super waspy. Like, well, Jim, here's what I think. I'm going to play some cricket and make up my mind. Like, oh, boy.
Yeah, maybe if in real life he had like one of those mid-Atlantic accents, which is, American, but you just sound vaguely British, like Gore Vidal. But I'm watching it. I'm like, he's not trying.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. He should have given that Elephant Man effort. Oh, God. I was just thinking if he walked on the set as the Elephant Man. as Ward Christopher, like, Ward, what should we do?
I am not an animal. I am Warren Christopher.
I am not an animal just because I'm in politics.
But that's the other thing is it bothered me, but then again, I'm like, well, he's giving a solid performance, so who cares?
Yeah. Kevin Spacey was good as the hero in that movie. If you view it objectively, he did a good job at playing the moral center. He didn't play it up too much. He kind of still had that condescending candor to him, but that's okay. I mean, he's a guy in politics who's highly educated. They're going to sound that way sometimes. I'm not sure if the real Ron Klain looked or sounded like Kevin Spacey. Hopefully he didn't have little kids in his jacuzzi, but that's another story.
Yes, there's been no allegations made to that effect.
Yes,
just trying to cover us here.
Just to get the record straight. But I will say one thing that doesn't make for very dynamic filmmaking is when like 50% of your film is people staring at television screens, and that's what a lot of this movie is. People looking at the TV and then sighing in disappointment while the other side's going yes. And that's like 90, like the whole movie could have just been comprised of news clips and you would have gotten the same thing.
Yeah, it is weird that kind of, it's almost like watching a sporting event, or like you see those commercials where kind of like what you described, like the rival team gets a touchdown, and you cut to another, the fans going like, oh, or yay. It did feel very much like that. Maybe that was intentional because this turned into such a sporting event.
Come see election night at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Dude, I was going to say, if it weren't for COVID, I would have no doubt that they'd do something like that.
Yeah. They'll still have election night at B-Dubs. They just won't let you know about it. Yeah. Now I want Buffalo Wild Wings.
I kind of do too.
I was like, I don't want to regress back to my old weight, but
well, but you dip your toe in it a little bit, and when I say dip your toe in, I mean that lovely
ranch
spicy sauce. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to. Oh, my Quentin Tarantino.
Okay, fingers. Maybe toe was.
Yeah.
Although I'll say this with no regrets, if Uma Thurman dipped her toe in spicy sauce from Buffalo Wild Wings, I would eat it off of her toe.
Okay, gross. We're moving on.
Yeah. Well, maybe her toe from Kill Bill Volume 2, because that seemed to be what got Tarantino's attention in mine too.
That's Volume 1 where she wiggled it.
Oh, in the truck. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I more so remember Volume 2 than I remember Volume 1, so maybe that's just my.
Did you ever see the honest trailers for every Quentin Tarantino movie?
No.
There's a 5-minute song about like feet in there or something like that. It's just feet.
Oh, I'm gonna watch that right after we get off this thing.
Yeah. Although I think it's big. All right. Recounts. Okay,
yes. Yeah. Sorry, I got us sidetracked by wings and feet.
Yeah. Ugh. Gross. No, like I'm sure there's like some weird Pornhub fetish video.
What do you mean weird?
Sorry. Yeah. Hey, don't shame. Don't fetish shame. We don't do that here.
That's right.
Yeah. Unless you're Kevin Spacey. Right.
Oh yeah, that's an army of one right there.
Why don't you dip your toe in that jacuzzi there? I can't do Kevin Spacey. I could with a little bit of practice.
Well, you're also too old, I think. Sorry.
Just slap a wig on me. It's a that's one thing. It wasn't like an SNL sort of film, this movie. It didn't feel like, oh, everybody's putting on makeup and wigs, or maybe because they weren't as famous or popular. They could have done that with Al Gore and George Bush, which they almost did when they reenacted that phone conversation where Al Gore rescinds his concession.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they have that really cheesy ADR where you just see the back of their heads and you could just tell that they're recording it in a booth because it's like the audio is so ridiculously clean that you could just tell that they put on the red light and said, okay, say it this way. You don't have to be snippy about it. And like, that's good.
Yeah. My issue with that is that, and again, I think this speaks to the partisan censorship of the filmmakers, which, it's their right to
Yeah.
make the movie. But, George Bush does not sound like that.
No.
What they were doing is a not quite as exaggerated version of George Bush as what Will Ferrell might do, but
Yeah.
they went out of their way to kind of recreate what I guess Al Gore genuinely sounded like, more conversational in tone, but still getting those inflections.
It's
With
true.
George Bush, who's like, I think we're going to win this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
No, no.
Yeah, he did sound a lot more cartoony, where Al Gore sounded more like a person.
Yeah.
He sounded a little more like Al Gore, a little like this. Well, George Bush is like, you're trying to put food on your family.
I still have my book of Bushisms, which I run across every once in a while. I'm like,
I miss those days.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying it's like at least that was back when our politician just wasn't outwardly an asshole, and just kind of had whoopsie moments.
Dick Cheney.
Yeah, Dick Cheney. Yeah. Yeah, you had him who told people to go fuck themselves, but at least he didn't call Mexicans rapists, so that's good.
Yeah. You got to take your victories where you can get them, I guess.
Yeah. God.
Now here, try this one on for size.
I want to be put in cryogenic sleep for another 4 years.
Well, just remember this. Back in the 2000s, when we were under the Bush thumb, people thought that he was the worst president in history.
Yep.
And history said, "Hold my beer." So
Yeah.
just imagine this. It's entirely possible that 15, 20 years from now, we could get somebody in office who makes us nostalgic for Donald Trump.
That I think that
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be triggering your anxiety like that.
No, I don't know if we'll be alive in 20 years, but that's another. We will be. Kind of.
We'll all be in the Thunderdome, but we'll be alive.
Yeah, we'll all be living in Atlantis, essentially.
The casino?
No, underwater. Like it's like if you've ever played BioShock, we'll be living in that.
I've never played, but I think I know what you're talking about.
It's basically like an underwater city. Yeah. So Waterworld will become a documentary, or we'll just be living in Mad Max Fury Road. All right, maybe that's a little extreme, but then we'll go, yeah, at least with Donald Trump, we didn't live underwater.
Well, we'll have to see about the results of the next couple weeks and few years, I guess.
No.
You got it. Look, it's was it always look on the bright side of life? They were singing this happy tune at the end of Life of Brian when they're all being crucified. You gotta laugh.
I remember looking on the bright side of life in 2016. It'll be good. Things are fine. Oh no! And I know the Republicans are listening to this, be like, yeah, cry your liberal tears. Ha ha ha.
Are there going to be Republicans listening to this?
No.
There you go.
Well, actually, I've had some people unsubscribe from me.
Oh, well, that's
Fuck
their
'em.
loss. Yeah.
I got an opinion. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be one of those guys who's like, oh, I'm in the middle and both sides are terrible. Like, nah, man, I got a fucking opinion. And I'm speaking it. Hello?
Did you drop out or did I?
Maybe both of us did.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about I might want to write down that time code. Sorry, I lost you there for a second.
No, that's all right. But no, it's like I have an opinion and I'm not going to hide it. A lot of people will hide under the guise of, well, both sides are terrible. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about people who are genuinely like, no, I hate both sides. And they try to rack up YouTube likes by basically stating that they hate everyone everywhere and everybody's terrible. And I don't agree with that at all. I think one side is particularly not doing terrible things while the other side is.
Yeah. And, that's, again, everybody's entitled to their opinion. And I think that they should be free and willing to express their opinions. I mean, that's the thing is I don't doubt that there are people out there who are in that kind of angry middle who just say screw everyone, but that's not a helpful It's
Yeah.
barely even an opinion. It's just like it's like
just,
an excuse not to pay attention, you know?
Exactly. It's an excuse to hate on everything. This movie definitely sways to the left, but it doesn't villainize the right, which is something I enjoy about it. How movies about Trump will be portrayed.
Right.
uh,
Well, and that's one of the things that I kind of alluded to this earlier, about the Democrats like constantly caving in. I think it's very ironic at the
I
end
forgot about
that
that. Yeah.
the end song is Tom Petty's "Don't I Won't Back Down,"
Yeah.
which it's ironic because at one point this movie came out in I think May or June of 2008, so it's one of those
Yeah.
election year movies. Game Change came out in March of 2012, so
Yeah.
it's very much a politically slanted movie designed to rile up a certain base. And again, that's fine. You can do whatever you want. But when it comes to what people are supposed to get out of this, the filmmakers may have started out intending to tell a story about how the election was stolen, or it was mishandled in some ways. But I think the real lesson to take out of this is, if you really believe in democracy, you need to stand up for yourself and not back down, and play by the rules, because the Republicans, they did some shady things like calling in those protesters and everything. But when it came down to it, is in a lot of cases, they were really ready to go after every loophole, every rule, everything that was legal to get their case all through the court systems and the different processes. Where a lot of the times the Dems were like, I don't want to do that. It's going to make us look bad. It's going to make us look petty. And it's like, well, do you want to look petty, or do you want to be remembered as the failed almost administration that allowed George Bush to become president and tank the country after 8 years?
And this is what the Democrats do again and again and again. The reason why Republicans always win is because they always agree with each other and they work together towards a goal of a new Holocaust. No, sorry, but towards the goal of winning. The Democrats are always like, I don't want to look bad. This is gonna be mean. Who gives a fuck? Grow some fucking balls. And they don't. They're just fucking pussies. That's why they wear those hats. I mean, that's where they get those reputations from. Like, honestly, I mean, look at what the Democratic Party is doing with Joe Biden. It's like you have Bernie Sanders and AOC, who brings in this enormous enthusiasm. And who the fuck do they give more camera time? Hillary Clinton. Because that's exactly who we want to see on screen, is Hillary fucking Clinton, especially after 2016, just to be reminded of that, and there she is with her dying appearance, like, don't make the same mistake again. Like, shut up, Hillary. And outside of, I'm sorry, but the Democratic Party doesn't look good when they're all rallying together instead of the one guy that everyone almost elected. Yeah. They do this again and again and again, and that's why I'm worried they're going to lose, because they just constantly pussyfoot around with what they want to say, with what they want to do, when the other side isn't doing that. Thank God for groups like the Lincoln Project, who are former Republicans who know how to make real ads against Donald Trump that are a million times more effective than Joe Biden. And you want to talk about another thing that Democrats don't know how to do? Look at Joe Biden's ads on YouTube compared to Donald Trump's. Donald Trump has these trolly thumbnails, but they attract a lot of people. And on both pages, they're both pro-Trump comments by the busloads. And not only that, but Joe Biden's page originally didn't include comments, and now they do, because everyone on the right was making fun of Joe Biden for not including comments on his page. The moment he included comments on those page, all the right-wing trolls just fucking bulldozed through his ads and created a huge distraction. And that's what they do every time. Don't give in. And they always give in, just like how they gave in on Recount.
Well, I mean, as far as the comments thing, I think it was a bad move to have a YouTube page or whatever advertisements without comments, because it does look like you can't stand up to the scrutiny. I mean, the reality is, turn the comments on, how many people are actually going to sit there and scroll through her comments? I mean, honestly, how many people are going to click on a political ad on YouTube? They hate these things when they pop up on their television, while they're watching Dancing with the Stars. But yeah, I think that was certainly my biggest disappointment in 2016 was I looked at the Clinton campaign. I was like, this is a disaster. They could have seen this coming. They should have seen this coming. Fortunately, there is, 4 years for them to regroup and put in a plan of action and really get some popular, I guess, momentum against this horrible monster that we've just elected. And I don't see that they've done it. I mean, we're here and we've got Joe Biden. You've got this field of 16 or more candidates. Like, I'm not going to say they're the best and the brightest in the country, but it was 16 people, a lot of them fresh blood. A lot of them had some really cool ideas. And we went with the old, crony establishment guy. And we've already got an old crony establishment guy in the White House. So I don't think you're giving voters much of a real choice.
Yeah. Well, you could thank South Carolina for that. If it weren't for them, Bernie Sanders would have won, but they had to screw that up. But it's and I knew when Joe Biden was running, I just kept thinking, oh God, he's going to win. And everyone's like, why? I'm like, because he's the most boring candidate imaginable. And it's always, the Democrats always win with the most boring candidate. Remember John Kerry? He was exciting. Jesus Christ. Every time he spoke, I wanted to take a nap.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Kerry because I've forgotten, but that's something I recalled watching Recount was, with the Swift Boat Veterans for Peace, and there were other numerous attacks against him. He famously came out and said, I'm not going to respond to those attacks. They're kind of silly. It just made him look like he couldn't respond. Instead of if you had like a real attack dog mentality, be like, fuck those guys. And, it's all a smear. And here's the actual evidence. And here's what I was really doing, that kind of a thing. But, he just kind of rolled over. That was another big disappointment for me, only a few years after the recount.
Yeah. That's like, I think in order to beat Donald Trump, you need to run on more than I'm not Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I've failed to see that. It's like maybe that'll win over enough people, but I don't see that it will. Like, I don't care what the polls say. At the end of the day, we'll see who really wins this election or steals it. And we'll see if there really is a recount, which I'd honestly prefer a recount rather than them throwing out the votes. And I would rather see a recount than seeing a Donald Trump presidency immediately that night. And
you know what? I would like to see if there is a Biden presidency to really have his base. You talked about the base kind of pushing or molding that administration to what they really want. I would hope that one of the things they want, in addition to social justice causes, is something that's fundamental to the fabric of the country, which is the vote. We talked about why in the last 14 or 20 years hasn't something been done about this. I'd love to see that be something that they work on for 4 or 8 years. Hell, I'd like to see the Trump administration work on it for 4 or 8 years.
Well, they're not going to.
Well, right. But it may be for the same reason that the party in power, the Obama administration, didn't do anything for 8 years, because they're like, oh, well, I guess all those voter shenanigans, that was just, I guess that happened to that guy. It didn't happen to us. We got in. So why go looking for problems when there clearly aren't anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I think, Obama's like, well, they voted for me in the
twice
electoral college. Yep, and twice. So let's not worry about it. But because that happened, because they didn't do anything, I mean, we should go by a popular vote. I mean, we had the electoral college because, well, we still have it because most states aren't represented. But it's like, yeah, but what about the people who populate most of this country? It's not about the states. It's about the people. Because guess what? Illinois, our votes don't matter for shit. It matters for people who are going to be elected to the House and the Senate. But for the presidency, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the United Florida of America.
There's the title of your episode right there.
Yes. I was going to originally call it Recount, a movie we don't want to relive, but I think the United Florida of America is, and everyone's been telling me, well, Trump doesn't need to win Florida in order to win the election. Like, no, he doesn't this time. But it hasn't been since 1992 that we've had a presidential candidate be elected president without also winning Florida.
Yes, and that sounds like a long shot, but all you have to do is say the magic word 2020. That which I think next year is going to be replaced in the dictionary. It's going to replace the word unprecedented because everything that happens now is just, well, it's 2020. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's why my pessimism is so severe, because I can't. Can we name one positive thing that has happened in 2020 in the news?
Probably, but that's a whole other conversation.
Not some guy who's like, he ran a cupcake shop in order to boost voter enthusiasm or to help some dying lady of COVID raise money. Not like that. Those little stories, like something big that happened that was good. I can't name one. It's just this year has been the most disastrous year I've ever seen in the history of the U.S. outside of the Civil War.
Well, it has been, but one thing that I think positive you can say, as much as 200,000 people dead is a tragedy, you can look at the original projections, which were in the millions, and you can say that at least, on some level, Americans came together to combat this pandemic. And even though it's still a very partisan issue, and even though we're still in the thick of it, it is not nearly as bad as it could have been.
Is that true? Because when it comes to the U.S. versus the rest of the world.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the projections for America was like 5 to 6 million dead. And as much as 200,000 people plus dying is a tragedy, you can't say that 200,000 versus 5 to 6 million is not a good thing.
Or if we still had a global pandemic office. I know he didn't fire everyone from there. He rearranged their positions.
Right, but that wasn't the question. The question was, can you name some good news that we got in 2020? I'm like, yeah, most of us are still here.
Is that good news? Well, we had a global pandemic, but at least 6 million people are dead. It's only 200,000. Oh, that's a happy story.
No, that is a happy story, Mike, because that is a fraction of what they were predicting.
Yeah, but the fact that this thing even got here.
But again, you keep moving the goalposts. I'm saying if you have to have a pandemic, okay, I'm not going to say if you have to. If you have a pandemic, and the projection is by the end of this year, we could lose 5 to 6 million people if we don't figure something out. Then at the end of that year, when you're looking at I know we're not out of this yet, so let's say 200,000 to 300,000 people, I'm going to call that not a win, because you can't really think of those terms in terms of global or even national catastrophic death, but it is something that's better than the alternative. Like if you could flash forward to the alternate timeline where we lost 6 million people and someone said, what if there was an alternate reality you could visit right now where most of the people that you know or in your circle, or let's say your 50 friends who died of COVID-19 would not have died of COVID-19, which reality would you like?
I don't know I think either way, we were going to shut down no matter who was president. And we would have prevented more of those deaths. Also, with a different president, this probably would have never have even entered the U.S., let alone the world, since we're in charge of that.
That's not true, because this was here before people knew about it. And that's one of the reasons we had the spikes in numbers. I mean, the reason that we knew to shut down travel from other countries is because we knew that there were cases in the country before we knew about what this virus even was.
And why did President Trump ignore it during November?
I don't know that he ignored it during November.
It's been well documented, and his chief of staff has even said they have no plan for the virus.
When did he say this?
About 2 days ago.
That they had no plan, or they have no plan?
Have no plan.
Oh, I understand that. And I understand what that sounds like, and I also understand what it is, and it's not exactly as bad as that sounds.
Oh, to quote President Trump, it is what it is.
Yeah. But yeah, we've gotten way far off topic.
Yes,
of
we
this,
have.
and yeah,
well,
I gotta go.
How can we not these days? But yeah, how much have we actually talked about Recount?
A lot. We talked. Well, because
No,
honestly,
this all has to do with the electoral process and who we elect and how the parties act, and it all has to do with that. The movie itself, if I were to give it a rating, I'd still give it 3 out of 4 Guinnesses. It's entertaining. It gives you the information you need. It's partisan, but not too bipartisan. Uh, Overall, each character seems to have a unique trait to them. Dennis Leary is Dennis Learying it up. Kevin Spacey is good at playing the man who's in charge of leading the campaign towards what is essentially, as is depicted in this film, a death march, which could be an allegory for next week. And God, I hope I'm wrong. Man, I hope my therapist is right, which I'm calling him on election day.
You might want to start that call early because I'm sure that there'll be the phone's ringing off the hook.
Oh, he said he told me to feel free to call. I'm like, okay, you've been warned. I think, yeah, Laura Dern. I thought Catherine Harris as a character, maybe it's not an accurate portrayal, but she's an entertaining character. Like, I see her on screen, I'm like, wow, this woman's completely delusional. And
yeah, and that's sort of my problem. Is it's almost like the Daily Show problem from back in the day, and probably even still now. It's like, oh, I don't watch the news, I just watch the Daily Show. You turn to a comedy news program that has a political slant in order to get your information, so you can walk away with a completely distorted view of reality that informs the way that you actually engage in politics in the world.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a parody though, or it didn't feel too slanted, because there was that wonderful moment with James Baker where we find out, oh, these people are human and they actually do care, and they don't, they're not outwardly being nefarious in their actions.
Well, yes, and I agree. I'm talking specifically about what Laura Dern did or was directed to do with Catherine Harris. And she kind of sticks out like a sore thumb because she's the most one-dimensional person in this movie.
Yeah.
She's got these kind of bug eyes like, oh, I just walked off the beauty pageant, runway, and now I'm Secretary of State of Florida. And then she has no opinions. She's constantly told by this group of, old men advisors like what to think and what to say and what to do.
Yeah.
I don't believe, and maybe this is my naivete, I don't believe you get to be the Secretary of State by being that kind of a person.
Depends who pulls the strings for you.
Well, but you at least have to.
Border destiny.
No, you have to. Well, yeah, taking it back to Ed Wood, you have to have some kind of presence or sense. I think it's easy to say that about people, largely based on portrayals of people that we've seen in politics in the media.
I see. So you think the way? Oh yeah, well yeah, that's true, because I don't think she was given a human portrayal.
No,
she was very cartoony. Having said that, she was entertaining to watch.
She was, and it's great. But I had to I was like, oh, this is a great Laura Dern performance, but I think it's also kind of trashy and dangerous.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of Sarah Palin in Recount or
Julianne
Dreyfus?
Right?
Yeah, Julianne Moore. I almost said Julianne Dreyfus, but Julianne Moore's performance. Like, I thought that, did they make her well-rounded, or did they just kind of make her a one-dimensional dope?
I don't remember I don't even know if I watched the whole thing. I have vague. It's kind of like with Recount. I'm pretty sure I watched it at some point, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. I'd have to watch it again.
Yeah, I think from what I remember, no, they kind of added some dimension to her, but they did kind of make her like a Catherine Harris, where she was vastly unqualified and she was placed in the middle of this situation that was far beyond what she was capable of handling. But was Catherine Harris really like that? We know that she was very much a over the top figure, but was she stupid like they made her appear in the movie? I'm not sure. I know in with this film, aside from Catherine Harris themselves, basically the writer of this, Danny Strong, I didn't just look up his name. He interviewed basically everyone in this film, and every actor met with their character except for Catherine Harris. She didn't meet with Laura Dern, and she didn't want to be involved in this project, and she didn't like the way she was portrayed.
Which is reasonable.
Exactly.
I don't want to ascribe motive to anybody, but it's perfectly fine to assume, given the portrayal, it's kind of like, well, you don't want to meet with me. Here's how I'm going to write you, and here's how you're going to be portrayed.
Yeah.
Instead of taking a lead from like the Ron Klain or the Jim Baker, and like, we're going to write you, even though you didn't meet with us. There's still hours of footage Laura Dern could have watched, and who knows, maybe she did, and it still came out through this particular filter. But there's still a way to act a character as a human being, and they didn't pull that off in this aspect, and it really sticks out.
Oh, you just go to part 2 of the Comey Rule and just watch Brendan Gleeson as Trump. You will, if you want a good laugh. And I know what they were aiming for. Like, they basically try to make him look like he was Dracula, but it's just very cheesy. But all right, having said that, folks, God help us all. We're going to need it next week. But please, for the love of Christ, vote. Even if they throw out your vote, your thrown out vote could supersede the non-thrown out vote, which could help give us a new president. Wouldn't that be nice to wake up and not worry about what the president's going to tweet the next morning? Wouldn't that be nice? Think of that. And for the love of God, vote. Unless you're voting for Trump. Then I hope your car breaks down on the way to the poll.
Does that qualify as election interference, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I didn't cause the car to break down. I might have slashed the tires, but I didn't cause it to break down.
You are a member of the media, and you are telling people actively not to vote for someone.
Oh, well, like we all don't do that. I'll be Trump and I'll say, I'm just saying what you all think.
There you go.
Yeah. With the president himself trying to cause voter intimidation. But I mean, what happened in 2000 is so quaint compared to today. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, hopefully this is not one of the things we look back on and say, oh, remember the 2020 election? How quaint. Those are the good times.
I don't know if that's good. I think 2020 will be decided pretty quickly. And unfortunately, it's not going to go the way I'm hoping. I'm hoping that all of my doom prediction is going to be unfounded, because if it is, I will probably stop catastrophizing the way I do.
Well,
folks,
and even
right now. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say one last thing. I think an important message. Yes, get out and vote. But even if things don't go your way, whoever you're voting for, listen to the words of Tom Petty and and don't back down. I think if things don't go the way that you want them to be, I know it's going to be tough to not be demoralized and to think that things are hopeless. But one of the reasons things become hopeless is because people give up hope and they stop trying. So it's important to mobilize, run for office, or find someone that is on the same side as you are, who cares about the same issues you are and cares about them as in the way that you do, and vote for them, campaign for them. Stop worrying and just looking at Twitter and tweeting out, snarky things about the opposite side. Get out there and do something.
That's right. Be more like me.
Yes, you're making phone calls. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just to toot my own horn, be more like me. Actually call voters and make a difference. Yeah. As I was telling Ian before, I think I didn't address the story, and I said I was going to. But I called a woman who was in North Carolina. She requested a mail-in ballot. And as we know, Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, who looks like Hank from Breaking Bad, he has been tossing out the machines that count through the mail by the thousands. He's been slowing down the mail intentionally so that Donald Trump can win. And that there's no question about that, considering how much money he gave to his campaign before that. And this lady was telling me she requested a mail-in ballot 3 days ago. She didn't get it, or 3 weeks ago, not days, weeks ago, and she didn't get it. So I told her, do you know where your polling place is where you can pick up a ballot? Yes. She's older. She can't get around. So I say, can you get someone who can drive down there for you, pick it up, and you can fill out? She's like, yeah. I go, and then could they drop it off for you directly in the mailbox? She says, yes. I'm going to go do that. Thank you for letting me know about that. I'm going to do that right away. And because of that, I saved a vote for being thrown out. And you could do the same thing. We have 6 days left. And this is not a political advertisement, but if you want to join with me, I joined this thing called People's Action. And we deep canvass across the country. And we're actually calling voters who are undecided, and we actually empathize and listen to them rather than judge them. And despite all the shit I say here, that's me expressing my opinion. With them, I don't say that. I don't call them morons to their face. But you empathize, you talk with them. And I've been able to win over 3 voters by doing that and preventing 1 vote from being thrown out. So you can make a difference, and you have the time to do it. I'm actually going to provide the link to their canvassing just because I can. And maybe it's a good idea for everyone to go organize. So with Recount, don't forget to organize. And even if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, maybe take some time off, enjoy your Christmas, and then the next year get ready to fight again. Having said that, Ian, thank you so much for coming on. Ian, you make calls too. No.
Well, I certainly appreciate you having me on to talk about this movie and all the other kind of ancillary topics that come with it. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, my ADD kicking in. Yes. But no, thank you. You're a good man. You're an empathetic man. I'm glad that we can disagree on things and still, come together. That might change after November. No, I'm just kidding. Please go out and vote. Please be active. The link to People's Action Deep Canvassing is going to be in the link to this episode. I actually have to drive over to work and clock in during a pandemic. So
well, hey, you have a work to go to, so count your blessings.
Yeah, I guess you could call it a job.
If they pay you money, then it's a job.
Having said, and also go. I've said enough. All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Ian. I don't know how to wrap this up. God help us all. And I'll see you after the well, no, I'll see you guys on Ian's podcast about the Mandalorian, where I'm sure I'll bring up politics somehow like an idiot. No, it's a live podcast, so I better shut my trap. All right.
All right, man. Take it easy. I'll talk to you Sunday night.
Okay. See you guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Who actually won this election? Who won it?
I should tell you, you're probably going to lose tomorrow.
It's certainly one of 2 possibilities.